Hello, my name is Sebastian Stackness, and today I'm going to be giving my final presentation on Argentina. So, to start off with, my personal connection to the country really started when I was younger. My grandfather would always tell stories to the entire family about his travels in South America. Consistently, he would always mention Argentina as his favorite and had nothing but rave reviews about the country's nightlife, climate, people, and lifestyle. He loved it there. So, upon receiving the case study, I immediately knew I wanted to do Argentina. Some general information on the country: Argentina is located in South America to the south of Uruguay and Paraguay and east of Chile. Its capital is Buenos Aires, and about a third of their population is located there, with about 45 million people living within the borders of Argentina. The country's racial mixture is broken down into 97% being European or mestizo, likely because of a large trend of Spanish and Italian immigrants coming to the nation in the 19th century. 2.4% are indigenous, and this is likely so low because of government efforts at lowering the indigenous population that I'll talk about later on, and 0.4% African. So the religious breakdown of the country is overwhelmingly Catholic at 92%, and 2% Protestant, 2% Jewish, and 4% in the other category. So for a developing nation, Argentina's urban population is extremely high, and it's also higher than the United States at 92.1%. Meanwhile, their literacy rate at 99% is consistent with the US and is also extremely high for a developing nation. So, one issue that I have noticed in Argentina that has really been at the forefront of life for several hundred years in the country has been racism. So, in the constitution that governs the entire country of Argentina, which was founded in 1853 for the Constitution, racism was really ingrained into that document. The model of the United States was taken for their Constitution, and so a lot of explicitly racist things, such as promoting immigration specifically desired from Northwestern Europe, was extremely huge in the Argentine government in the 1800s. Luckily, a lot of these issues were dealt with in the 1990s under the man pictured to the right, Carlos Menem. He was the first Argentine president born to immigrant parents. They had come over from Syria, and he was raised Muslim. He actually converted to Roman Catholicism for a life of politics, and once he was in the office of presidency, he removed that requirement in 1994 for presidents to be Roman Catholic, and he also created the National Institute Against Discrimination, Xenophobia, and Racism. Underneath his administration, a lot of the formally racist ideas in Argentina were expunged, although a lot of culturally racist ideas still persist to this day. Unfortunately, a lot of slang words exist that are demeaning towards Afro-Argentines and indigenous Argentines, and this really hasn't been dealt with on a large scale. In the 1800s as well, Argentina was sort of supposed to be an extension of Europe into South America, and they would constantly brag to the rest of the world about how European they were, while the government was systematically targeting indigenous communities and putting them into either slave labor camps or exterminating them in their villages, which was really problematic and shows the extent of how crazy the racism and how rampant the racism was in the country. In Argentina, the government has been independent since 1816. They declared independence from Spain only because Napoleon had actually taken control and the Spanish king fled to South America. Since Argentina didn't want to be ruled by a foreign nation and betray the king, they declared independence from Spain and were originally supposed to return to their status as a colony once Ferdinand was back in Spain as the rightful king. Unfortunately, though, once he was back in power, they remained independent. This was huge for Latin America. This was a great win for South America, and this paved the way for a lot of other freedom movements in South America. So Argentina's had the same constitution since 1853. They modeled theirs after the United States, as earlier mentioned, and this has really been one of the most essential items to the head of state. They have, as shown in their constitution, a democracy and a republic. This hasn't always been the case, though. In reality, from 1976 until 1983, they had a military dictatorship that ended with economic turmoil and financial strife. But this was all really created by U.S. interests after populism sort of ruled rampant in South America under the direction of the Peronists. The current president, Alberto Fernandez, is also a Peronist, and this is really essential in paving the way for a better Argentina. So another issue that has really taken the forefront of Argentine life has been COVID-19. So Argentina hit over 1 million cases in October. The crazy part about all of this is that they had a lockdown extremely early in March. People listened to it and people liked what the government was doing. Everyone thought it would be over quickly. Once the summertime hit and the government relaxed lockdown measures just a little bit, people sort of took it as a free pass to do anything, and cases exploded. Hospitals surged in the amount of cases that they had, and beds really became a lot more scarce. Some problems like that are still happening in places like Buenos Aires. So now people are really going against government decrees, and protests have actually happened in the capital against these lockdown measures. Argentina's economy after COVID has really, really struggled, and a lot of businesses are closing that can't make ends meet. And on top of that, the people's approval rating of the government hit an all-time low in the summertime and has slowly been recovering. But for an administration that just took office in December, this is really problematic. Here is a CNN interview on the economic hardships in Argentina.
Has been hit especially hard by the COVID-19 pandemic.
La pandemia y la cuarentena.
Financial analyst Jonathan Loidy says the pandemic and the quarantine measures worsened an economy that was already in recession. He points out there has been no real economic growth since 2011. The GDP has been falling for years, and the annualized inflation rate, even before the pandemic, was 55%.
Una permanente
Uncertainty is the word that best describes life in Argentina nowadays, Loidy says. The government just recently reached a deal with creditors who are owed $65 billion, roughly 20% of its crushing $323 billion total debt.
Una vacuna.
But President Alberto Fernandez says his priority is a venture involving Oxford University, an Anglo-Swiss lab, and Mexico to manufacture a coronavirus vaccine that he hopes would put his country's economy back on track. But patience is running low. About 25,000 Argentinians took to the streets of Buenos Aires Monday to protest a judicial reform launched by Fernandez, the economic crisis, and the government's handling of COVID-19. Back at the old has been hit especially.
In conclusion, Argentina has had a lot of issues dealing with the legacy of colonialism, although there has been recent progress in recent years. This has really sort of been offset, unfortunately, by the economic problems the country has. Socially, it has become more accepting, more liberal, and more supporting of diversity and of expanding minority rights. Unfortunately, though, a lot of this has been hampered by the economic issues that the country faces, as the government blames a lot of the economic problems on immigrants, unfortunately. And along with COVID-19, many of these problems are just being amplified. The economic downturn in the country has made life challenging for many everyday Argentines, and with inflation higher than it's ever been, everything is extremely unclear right now. I will say, learning in Latin American studies about sort of a globalized Latin America and then taking that information and applying it to Argentina, I saw that Argentina was definitely one of the luckier countries in terms of the legacy of colonialism, especially, and what could happen. It's definitely one of the bigger countries and one of the countries that can sort of provide a shoulder to lean on for smaller Latin American nations. And I will say I was extremely grateful for the opportunity to learn about Argentina.